And hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of AWS on Stack Overflow, where we get to do some, oops, I've just got to play with some sound here. I can hear myself, which is not good. So, AWS on Stack Overflow, where we get to answer some questions on Stack Overflow, discuss any AWS topics as a community, try to knock over some of those outstanding questions out there, generally learn stuff about AWS and have a nice time as a bit of a community. So my name is John Rotenstein. I'm a developer advocate, otherwise known as a technical evangelist at AWS, based in Sydney, Australia. So here in Sydney, it is actually Thursday already. So those of you who are back in Wednesday, welcome from the future. Here in Sydney, it's actually the onset of winter. I'm looking outside and it's cold and a bit miserable. So happy to be indoors talking with you folks. Would love to hear from all of you. Where are you located? Let me know what brings you to this show. Would love to say hello to you, especially if you've been answering on Stack Overflow. Let me know your Stack Overflow name, and we'll form a bit of a community together. So, what is Stack Overflow? So Stack Overflow is a site for asking developer questions. So, -3, let's just go to Stack Overflow here. You'll often land on Stack Overflow and you'll see a page that looks a bit like this. And it's a bit confusing for the first time you get there, but once you've been using it, it really cuts out all the stuff you don't care about and goes straight to the questions. So here we have a whole list of questions that are available. I've filtered this down to say only show me things that are tagged with Amazon or AWS. And I can go through and see all the questions. How popular is Stack Overflow? Well, you've probably done a web search, landed on Stack Overflow and found an answer. Let's give that a try. If I was to say I'm interested in AWS Outposts, which was just mentioned on our CQ program, if you're watching our certification quiz show just earlier, AWS Outposts maybe RDS. Actually, Stack Overflow might not have a lot of things on Outposts, but let's have a look. If I do a search on Stack Overflow, oh, bad example. Let's go for something more common. Maybe an S3. My web browser has gone crazy. S3 bucket policy error. And we see some AWS websites coming up here. I'll just make that bigger. And look, here we are, Stack Overflow. So it's now answer number 3 on the screen already. I'm giving some information about S3 bucket permissions with lots of answers coming up there. So it can be a great way to obtain information. According to Alexa Top Sites, which tracks the top sites. Alexa, this is not Amazon Alexa, which is the one where you talk to your home assistant. This is another company called Alexa that is owned by Amazon, but it is not Alexa. Got that? So, this lists the top websites out there, and my machine is freezing, so I'll give it a moment until it unfreezes itself. Otherwise, this will be a very embarrassing stream. Come on, computer. You can do it. I have too many screens plugged in. It's not very happy to me. I'll give it another 20 seconds before I do the horrendous reboot. And we'll just chat about things while that's happening. I have a new Mac ready for me that has been given to me. I've just got to configure. This is an older 2015 Mac that is just pushing it a bit too hard. Oh, embarrassing. Okay, I'm going to have to reboot my machine. So let's talk a bit while I reboot. Has anything embarrassing like this ever happened to you when you have to do presentations? Tell me your favorite stories. Let's boot this thing up again. So I should explain a bit about what I do on Stack Overflow. He says logging into his computer. I used to be a person who would just do a web search and randomly land on Stack Overflow and find some great information. And after a while, I realized, you can vote on questions and answers by hitting a little up arrow. And if I saw an interesting question that I knew an answer, or if I saw an answer, first of all, that was useful to me, I could upvote that answer. And the person who provided that answer then gets some scores, what's called a reputation. And that makes them go, oh, somebody likes me, and they'll answer more questions. I then progressed a little bit and I started answering questions. Because I saw a question, I thought, oh, I know the answer to that one. It was a little bit scary, but I put my answer up there, and people liked it, they upvoted, I thought it was great, and I kept going. So this gamification of Stack Overflow is fantastic, because as the reputation points come in, it's like somebody saying, thank you, that was really nice to me, and you just want to keep answering questions, and it can be quite addictive. Not getting audio. So let's see. Can anyone out there hear audio? Otherwise, I've got to play around here a little bit. Active. I'm getting audio. I'm online. So, Mark, you might want to redo your web browser to see if the audio is coming through there. Or try a different browser. So, thanks there, Tesseract, to let me know that my whole system isn't going totally screwy today. Mark, is that you who are asking about the... Oh, he can't hear me anyway. I have a Mark who's going to ask me a question about bare metal instances today. So I said, come on to the show and let's have a look. So what was my history? Yes, I started answering Stack Overflow questions. I enjoyed it. My vote went up. People started to say, hey, that's really neat. And now as part of my job, I get to spend time on Stack Overflow answering some questions. My machine is coming live. We'll be able to hook back into it in a moment. Okay, it's looking good here. Log in a couple of extra bits and pieces. Fantastic. And we're almost ready to roll. So, where are you folks from? Love to hear where people are hanging out in Stack Overflow land and Twitch land. What do you focus on primarily, says Hevatar. So I'm a bit of a generalist. I used to be an AWS technical trainer, and that was a great job to have as a generalist, because I could talk a little bit about everything. Typical, the base AWS services. I have a bit of a background in big data, so I love Amazon Redshift, played around a bit with EMR. I like Python, so whenever I do Lambda functions, I always enjoy doing my Lambda functions with that. What else do I like specializing in? What I found is that there's a lot of services on AWS, many of which I just don't know what they are. And open my chat. And the best way to learn what a service is on AWS is to play with it. So a while ago I thought, oh, I hadn't played with services like Translate and Transcribe. So I wrote a little program to do that. I should show you sometime. And this is looking better. Whenever I play with a service, I understand it better, and then I can start answering questions for it on Stack Overflow. But if somebody really gets deep into a product, I don't know as much as what they do. So I'm a little bit of sort of everything that's going around there. Okay, almost ready here. Terribly embarrassing. Okay, that isn't quite working. So let's go into Alexa top sites and see what I can do here. Okay, so this is what I was attempting to show you before. Alexa top sites shows you all the top websites. I'm not too sure how they measure it. And if we scroll down and have a look, Stack Overflow, Netflix, Microsoft, Instagram, Blogspot, Yahoo, Twitch. Twitch TV is even higher rated than Stack Overflow. What do you think about that? Here we are, number 40, Stack Overflow. So it's in the top 40 websites where people land on the net. So very good for programming question and answer. And that's what it's all about. Mark, are you out there? Can you hear me now? So let's go through and do a bit of the show. I will just see if I can get my Firefox up and going. One sec. So many windows, so little screen. Fantastic. I've got that working now. Okay. So what I normally do each day is several times a day actually, is I hop onto Stack Overflow and just have a look at new questions that are out there. So I've created some filters here on tags. And in this case, I've set anything tagged with Amazon or AWS. Not everybody tags things perfectly correctly all the time. So it is sometimes not that simple to find a question, and they might go unanswered if they've got slightly the wrong tags. Yes, sir. Oh, no. Creator. Thank you, Firefox. We need some background music here. Da, 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 da. Okay. Excellent. Everything is happening now. Okay, so I just looked through these headings. Now, this gives the first point of doing something on Stack Overflow. The heading, the title of the question is very important because people like me flick through it and go, oh, is this an interesting topic to look at? Do I have anything to offer by answering it? Thumbnails don't load after moving to S3. Let's have a look at that, for example. Oh, this is Django, which is a Python framework. So I'm not that great at it. Tesseract, would you like to create a volunteer group of people who do something similar to the show but work together in a way? It is funny you say that because I have a little room that we have created for like-minded people. If you are interested in answering Stack Overflow and you want to talk to other people doing that sort of thing, then I have this very room created for doing it. I'll put a link to this in the chat. And if you want to join in and say hello. And this is a great place to talk amongst each other and just say, hey, can anyone help me with this answer? Or can you upvote a synonym? Or how do I use this feature on Stack Overflow? So feel free to join the room. If you mention somebody in the, let me get this correct here. If you mention somebody in the room, you can get their attention. So you could just say and put a username in here, and the next time that they hop onto Stack Overflow, there will actually be a message indicator saying there is a message for you. So feel free to join in on the chat room, and we'd love to hear from you all. So hopping in, it is publicly accessible. And got to be careful my machine doesn't freeze again. Looks like this question is doing lots of code, and I'm not going to answer that one because it's a bit too complex. I have some questions I've made earlier if we run out of some good questions to discuss here. And my machine is slowing down. That's not good. Let's see if there's other questions here that I want to answer straight away. Revoking Ingress rules. This is interesting. Oh, Avatar, you're learning Django. Great. It's a framework like I know there's Flask, which is for making web servers. So what's Django? Can you give me your one sentence description of what Django is? You won't be able to say more than I know. And is my machine having a bit too much of a heartache here? I have to flip to another machine in a moment. It's very hard to answer Stack Overflow questions when your computer doesn't want to participate. Okay. I will and wrap you in other stories while I reboot my machine again and make it do a little less. So as I mentioned, I'm streaming here from Sydney. Australia has gone relatively well in the COVID stakes, and people are starting to use public transport again, come into work. Our trains are interesting. They've got little signs on the seats, sort of 1.5 meters away, and a train carriage can only take like 20 people if you correctly social distance yourself. So we're trying to slowly come back into how things are working. I'm actually sitting in the Amazon office in Sydney, and they've done a lot of things caring for people, temperature checks when you come to the office, and wiping down surfaces a lot. So the world is slowly returning to normal in Australia. You may have read that New Zealand has successfully, according to their definition, eradicated COVID, and that they haven't had any new cases for the last 3 weeks or so. And they're about to remove all of the restrictions in New Zealand. There's even rumours that they might allow Australians and New Zealanders to sort of have this Pacific bubble where they can interact with each other. So looking forward to some of those things continuing. But wherever you are, it's always good to do Stack Overflow, do some more online stuff. My computer shut down because of a problem. That's very nice. Good for you in the US. It's very difficult to socially distance. Has it become very decisive whether the virus exists or not? Yeah, it's hard to fight something you can't see. New Zealand locked down very quickly. They closed all their borders. Being an island of only a few million people was an easier thing to do. So good luck to them for having done that. Okay, my computer is coming back to me. Let's give this another try. I've disconnected one of my monitors. So, whoa, that's not coming up correctly. This is live. Plug that one in again. Go there, hit the button, and yay, that's working a bit better. Okay, let's have a look at this question. I should actually put it in the chat if you ever want to follow along. Here is a link to this question. No, I don't want Chime, thank you. Amazon Chime is our internal communication network. There's a link to this question I'm doing. So let's have a read of the question. Finally, back again. Sorry about that. I've been asked to figure out how to create items in AWS CLI for future automation later. I'm stuck on security groups. I can create one fine. I can add ingress rules, no problem. But I notice the default group that gets created has an ingress rule of all traffic, any, and references the security group as its source. I'll explain that in a moment. I want to remove this as a possible vector for security risk. I get an error saying the rule doesn't exist. I've tried with the security group ID, group name, IP permissions. I don't see a way to edit the ingress rule either. Okay, I happen to know this because I've done some coding around this thing. So let's discuss what's going on here first of all. Let's hop into the EC2 console. Don't mind you seeing my username because you don't know my password or you don't have my MFA token. So if we look in a security group, we have inbound rules and outbound rules. And in the API, they're actually called ingress and egress rules. And the console has actually just changed recently for security groups. And my screen's a little small for it. So I have tabs here, inbound rules. So here I've got a security group that allows inbound from a particular IP address. And I've got outbound rules. And these outbound rules allow the traffic to go out of the instance. Normally, I would recommend leaving your outbound rules at default, which is all traffic, because you trust the software that's running on your instance, but you want to lock down the ingress rules. And the person is saying that when they create a new security group, there are some default, let's go back to that question. I've noticed the default group that gets created has an ingress rule of all traffic, any, and references the security group as a source. Now, which one are they talking about? They're talking about the inbound or the outbound. So if we create a security group, we'll just call this stack. And I won't add any rules. Here we are. So the default outbound rule allows, in this case, all traffic. So I don't think they're referring to that one. Stack already exists. I've got to come up with more creative names. Stack 2. And there's no rule there. So the default security group is probably the one created when you create a VPC. Let's give that one a try as well. So whenever you create a new VPC, all security groups are linked to a particular VPC. Tesseract is saying, be referring to the default security gets created when you create a VPC. Very good, Tesseract. That's what I was thinking. Let's go and create a new VPC. It's not too scary. I'll call this my stack VPC. Give it an IP range, which is always confusing. Oops, 16. See, told you it was confusing. And now this VPC is a big long number that ends with F1. If we go into security groups here, we should see a security group that is created in my F1 VPC, which is this top one here. And it's got an inbound rule of all traffic within the security group. I should explain this as well. Sometimes people say they're putting multiple resources inside a security group. So if one security group is used for two resources, it does not mean that those resources can automatically talk to each other. The rules for a security group are applied to each resource independently. And you've got to specifically allow those resources to talk to each other by referencing the security group itself. What this is effectively saying is anything with this security group can talk to anything else with this security group. So you can talk to each other. And he would like to get rid of these inbound rules. So I've had a very similar situation where whenever I connect to a particular instance, I've got a what I call my ops instance here, and I have a shortcut command here that says please log into my instance, and this is perfect. It's hanging. And the reason it's hanging here is the security group associated with this instance is not allowing my current IP address to get in. So I've got a little script I wrote here. And what this script does is it goes off and goes to a site called what is my IP. So if I curl this URL, it comes back with my public IP address, what it appears that my public IP address is that I'm using at the moment. Then it assigns it to a variable, and it calls this thing called authorize security group ingress, and it says my IP address /32, that says only my IP address. And it adds it for SSH and RDP. So if I just run that little script, it goes off and adds it to my security group. And now if I run my SSH command, I can successfully log into my instance. So that's the opposite of what he wants to do. I added one to the security group, but I wanted to remove it. Now sometimes that security group fills up because there's only so many, let's see if I can find it in here. There's only so many rules you can have in a security group. Ops-win security group, here it is. And you can see here, okay, it's only got a few IP addresses that I've used here over time. But sometimes that fills up and I want to remove it. So it can be handy to work through and remove each of those things. Now, if you're a Python programmer, this would be EC2. There is a command that can remove, oh, they said CLI, didn't they? It's easier via Python. AWS CLI revoke. What's the command called here? They said that they use, no, I said that I used this command here called authorize security group ingress, which means there's another one called revoke security group ingress. And the biggest problem with this particular one is it's hard to specify the parameters. Let's have a look. So whack that up. This is the hard bit. When you tell it to revoke a particular thing, you've got to give this massive JSON string that says exactly which thing to revoke, because you've got to say revoke the one that grants port 22 access from this IP address from this range, blah, blah, blah. It can be very, very difficult. And I find it's actually easier to do in Python to revoke a particular one because all this information can actually be given to you. So let's see if we can do this in the AWS CLI. There is another command which would be describe security group. Live coding. Let's see what we come up with here. Describe security group. Security groups. That will come back. You can ask for a particular ID and it comes back with, let's give it a go. Let's have a look at it. Our security group that we created was this one here. Nope. We created a new one and it's big long number. There it is. So that is our security group. Give this a go. AWS EC2. You recommend reading any material about VPC or just stick to the documentation? Hey, if you read all the documentation, discarded, you're doing fine. The way I learned the VPC was I actually was presenting a course on it, and that was not my assigned bit because I wasn't prepared. But when it came time to present about VPC, the person who was going to present it was out of the room on a phone call, so I just did it myself. And it's amazing how simple it can really be. Just create a VPC, create some subnets. I often say the best way to learn AWS is to bring a friend because they can normally know how to do it and you can learn a lot from it. I would tend to recommend watching videos. Those of you who have seen me on this site have seen me that I often recommend watching videos. I'll put this link in. This is a list of videos from our reInvent sessions. And if I search for VPC here, there's some great presentations from one-to-many, evolving VPC design, etc. So definitely watch the videos. You can play them back at twice the speed, see somebody else doing it, and then have a bit of a play for it yourself. So let's see if I want to describe this particular security group. I'm going to describe security groups. EC2 describe security groups. Group IDs would be good. And I've got the security group ID I typed in earlier. And it has come back with IP permissions. Now notice it has not given back the Ingress rules. Or has it? It's given, oh no, it has. This is the default IP egress rule that was put on there. So it's saying from the internet, no, what am I saying here? VPC, go to that particular one, have a look at the contents. It's got an ingress rule that is referring to itself, the 7B. Is that the correct one? That is not what I'm intending to do here. Mark is online with the metal instances. We'll have a look at that one next. Hey, your audio is working. Fantastic. That was that security group, which was 7B. That was the 7B thing we listed here. Oh, here it is. Yes. So this is the one. So it's saying allow all traffic to come in with itself the same security group reference. So this is the thing that you want to remove. So it looks like ingress is just called IP permissions and egress, outbound rules are called IP egress. By the way, what does StackOverflow have to do with the stream? So for those of you who joined a little bit late, my name is John Rotenstein. I'm an evangelist at AWS and I like answering AWS questions on StackOverflow. So if you've ever landed on StackOverflow and thought, oh, I might be able to answer questions, join with me, answer questions, or just generally learn about AWS. So we now want to get rid of this particular IP permission. The problem with this IP permission, to delete it, we have to specify exactly that we want that protocol and that user group pair, etc. And it can be very hard to give the right command to the egress, the revoke command. I have the revoke command up here. Let's find the revoke command. But there is a trick. And the trick is the describe security groups command gives you all the information you need to revoke the rule itself. So it looks like to revoke it, we've got to say AWS EC2 revoke security group ingress. And then we've got to say which group we are modifying, which will be that particular security group. BSD guy, I'm awesome, fantastic. I think you're all awesome for joining me on the evening. Nothing better to do than watch somebody else answer Stack Overflow. Hopefully I will inspire you to answer some Stack Overflow here as well. IP permissions is what we've got to specify to say which permissions we want to remove. And it's going to be these particular permissions here. If we look for IP permissions down the bottom, it needs this really, really ugly thing. But do not fear, because if we are lucky, it also accepts some JSON. So if we can pass in the correct JSON syntax, then we can remove those particular things. So here's the trick. I could do it in Python. Let's see if I can do it in a command line. I want to take this output of IP permissions and pass it as the input to the revoke command that should be removed. So if I put that in backward ticks and say the command that I did before here, describe. So I'm saying take the output of my describe security groups, query. So the query string on the AWS CLI tells it where to go in here. So I'll say query security groups dot IP permissions. And in theory, this will either work or die in a heap. And invalid JSON it's given me. So I wonder how I have to give it JSON. That almost worked well as a concept. So if I just run that in a command, it will give me the correct JSON that I should use. And theoretically, if I was to run that, passing IP permissions and give it that JSON. How do I wrap JSON? Maybe I've got to wrap the JSON in a single quote. Let's see if that'll work. Single quote, paste in the JSON, single quote, end, and damn, it failed. Okay, I'll have to come back and give him a Python explanation of how to do this because it's not so easy from the AWS CLI. I will park that one and come back to that question later without you having to write failed code. The simple answer is in Python, when you do a describe on the security group, it comes back with an object and you can just pass it straight back to the revoke command and it will revoke it quite nicely. So Mark is online and Mark has been coming to me about, or at least he asked a few questions on here and he wanted some assistance to do with some bare metal instances. And the issue he's been having, we've got another picture here of a second question. He has been launching some bare metal instances in, looks like US East 2 and having some trouble. Is the audio a bit low for people? I can turn up the audio, but otherwise turn up your volume. My thing says it's sending the audio through pretty loud, but thanks for that feedback, discarded. Tesseract, JSON, etc. Okay, so let's give a go launching a bare metal instance. So Mark's problem was he could not successfully get the bare metal instance to launch and have the 2 out of 2 status checks come through. So let's give it a go. The best way to see how something works is to try it, and it's a great way to learn. I had never used bare metal instances before, so let's give it a try. I will go into the Ohio region because I think that's where Mark is doing these things. Excellent, the audio is okay out there. And if I zoom in on this, the picture won't zoom. So I can see that he is using the US East 2, that is our Ohio region. Various different availability zones. This might be something that's relevant to the question, so we'll have a look and try to launch a C5 metal instance and getting this problem here where it's 1 out of 2 checks. So I tried it myself and it worked okay, but let's give it a try here. So I'm in the Ohio region. I will go and launch an instance. Now, he was using, if I believe correct, Ubuntu in his earlier question. Ubuntu 18.04 in US East 2C. Got to talk about that too. So Ubuntu 18.04, fantastic. I'll select that. I will select a C5 metal instance. And this basically means you get the whole box. So the way it works in the AWS data center is there are host computers, which are really big, beefy computers, and they slice them up into virtual machines. So normally you see these instance types like C5, 24 extra large, 18, 12, 9, etc. What it really means is a whole computer is the equivalent to one of these metal instances, 96 CPUs, 192 gigs of RAM. That's also the same as a 24 extra large. It's just not bare metal. We've got a virtualization layer on there. Or you can have something that's half that size. So the 12 extra large is half of a 24 extra large. So it has half the number of CPUs. It has half the number of RAM. Or you can get something, a 4 extra large, in which case we can host 6 4 extra larges on the same host, etc. So we just keep chopping it up, chopping it up. You get a virtual machine. None of the resources are shared. So your RAM is your RAM, your CPU is your CPU, but they're all running on the same host computer using virtualization. Metal is slightly different. It's a very, very thin virtualization layer. Actually, we have something called the Nitro system, which does the virtualization on a card. So you get the full machine, but it's still in a sort of virtualized environment. So let's give that a go. Now, Mark said that he did it in the US East something region. Now, that is US East 2C. So there's a little secret that everyone knows, and that is my US East 2C is not necessarily your US East 2C. And the reason for that is whenever you ask somebody, where do you want to launch something, and you give them a list of A, B, C in alphabetical order, everyone chooses A, and everyone chooses A, and that data center gets very busy, and the other data centers don't get busy at all. So what they've done is they shuffle these letters between accounts. So what might be A in your account might be B in my account, might be C in somebody else's account, and that spread the load. It also created lots of confusion, and any new regions now, they're not doing that. So A is the same for everyone, B, etc. There are places you can look in some VPC settings to see the behind-the-scenes name of your particular data center. So I'm going to launch in US East 2C as well, but Mark, please be aware, it might not be the same US East 2C as you are doing. Let's name this instance, name bare metal, and we'll just go default settings for the rest of it, and go ahead and launch. Now, something I noticed was that launching this bare metal instance took something like 7 or 8 minutes until it was ready. I don't know why. Maybe it's to do with the bare metal virtualization layer. Maybe it's because it's got 192 gigs of memory that it has to clear out beforehand, but it does take a sizable time before that one's available. So we will pop back to that and have a look. In fact, let's launch some in the other AZs just to see if there is an example. I just use the launch more like this command that allows me to launch an equivalent one and change a setting. I'll show you how I did that. So that was launched in B and C. I can just say actions launch more like this. I will change the zone to A, so we'll get to try it in all of them. Fantastic. How much is this costing, you might ask, for a bare metal instance with 96 CPUs and 192 gig of RAM? You can search for this page. I'll put it in chat. And you can search for the cost. C5 metal is $4 per hour. So by all means, play with it. It's not often you can get a really great machine and play with it, but turn it off when you finish playing with it. Mr. Bob is saying, describe availability zones. Returns zone ID. Ooh, let's give that a try. So they have added new things here. Let's say EC2 describe availability zones. These new commands, fantastic. I'm going to say it's in US East 2, which is where we're playing around. And let's see what it comes back with. So that is the region name. This is the zone name that I see. And here is the zone ID. So this is the way to map. Thanks very much, Mr. Bob. This is the way to map your A to my A. You actually look at this US East 2. So it's the same region, AZ2. So my B is 2, my C is 3, my A is 1. So it looks like US East. They're not randomizing it. So it's coming out quite nice. But if you do something like, let's go for US West 2, which is an older region. My A is 1, my B is 2. Okay, I've got an old account, so that might map it out quite nicely. Let's try US East 1. It's bound to be a mess. US East 1 has such history, so many availability zones. My A is 1, my B is 2, my C is 4, my D is 6. Wow. and my E is 3. What I think it is in the past, we used to give people 3 availability zones per region, and they would be 3 random ones. And then later on, they said, oh, let's give all of them to them. So they added zone 3 back again, but I already had 3 or 4 AZs, so it actually gave me my E region as being zone number 3, and there's 5. So that's a good example of how things are mixed up. Thanks for that, Mr. Bob. While we are waiting for them to launch, let's look at some other questions that I marked earlier that might be interesting to look at. Here is my profile on Stack Overflow. I can see my reputation going up over time. You can see questions that I've answered. Talking about reputation, I'm quite happy because yesterday I again passed this 200 mark. It's pretty neat. If you exceed 200 reputation a day, there's officially a limit of 200 reputation, but you can get more if people accept your answer to a question. So old questions can only score so much, but new questions get more. Every time I go over 200 reputation, represented by this line, I head towards another badge that says I'm epic, or some super fantastic person for passing a silly line on the screen. So that's the sort of things that we do. Makes us come to work each day. There's one here that I wanted to look at. Let's start from the top. Let's pop in and have a look how our bare metal instances are going while I'm talking to you. They are initializing. Oh, here's a 2 out of 2 check. So there you are, Mr. Mark. My B, which is probably your B, has successfully come out there. We'll just wait a bit for the others to come back. Let's have a look here. Where's the question I just did? Where can I view mappings between resources? Oh, this question has been edited. It used to look a lot worse. Previously, at one point, I saw a mapping table between resources within AWS. For example, 3 columns saying X has Y, X is associated with V contained within R. Where is this mapping located? Does anyone know? Because I haven't seen anything quite like this. Where would you look to find the resource relationships between things in AWS? Now, there are some third-party companies who do these amazing mappings where they say this thing is linked to that, and you can do 3D fly-throughs of your whole infrastructure. I'd say the closest probably is AWS Config. So AWS Config is a service which routinely looks through your AWS resources, CloudFormation visualization tool. Ooh. Yeah. So the Cloud Designer, or something, what it's called, will visualize your template, but it doesn't visualize resources that are actually up and running at the moment. So AWS Config regularly looks at your resources in your account, certain resources only, and makes a note of them. So I could come in here and say, oh, please tell me about my EC2 instances. So I can say EC2. Instances, there we are. So show me an instance, give me a list of my EC2 instances. And it says, hey, here's an EC2 instance. I then go into it, and thank you very much. It then tells me that this instance has a particular ID tag. That's nice. I can go to a timeline, and I can see the history of this instance. So it looks like on the 28th of April, there were some changes made to this instance, and it gives me some information there. Let's just have a look at the event. Stop instance. So a stop instance command was run on this particular instance. So I can see the whole history of what has happened to this instance way back in time. So there's CloudTrail, which records all of these events, but Config keeps a history of all of these events, so you can go back and have a look at them another time. But there is another thing that Config can do, and that is if this thing here, relationships. So it tells me that my EC2 instance is in this VPC, is associated with this security group, is attached to this EC2 volume, is in this subnet within the VPC, and has this network interface. So I can then navigate and say, oh, let's go to that subnet. Here's the history of that subnet. Let's look at the relationships of that subnet. I can then see all the other instances that are within that. So that's one way of navigating the various relationships. Let's have a look how our bare metal instances are going here. 2 of them are up and coming, so we'll come back in a moment and have a play with that. So let's go and answer this question. underscore does a italics within Markdown. Bold. Instance is in subnet X. And you can also show the history. We put a pretty picture in there. So here's my instance. Let's do that. I will grab a pretty picture. This here. Go to Imager, something like that. And I just discovered the other day, I can say new post and I can just paste, and it will actually paste a picture in for me of that picture, which means I don't have to save it to disk or do anything. I'll go in and grab the address here. Let's put a pretty picture. This is going to be AWS Config relationships. And putting the exclamation mark at the front of the link means the picture is included within there. So yay, we've answered a question. I always like to go back and make sure the tags associated with the question are good. So this is Amazon Web Services. Can't really add any other tags for this one. So looking pretty good. Okay, let's pop back to our instances. And they're all running here. Sorry to disappoint you, Mark. So what I'll do is grab one of these IP addresses. Let's try and log in. SSH, give it my key pairs. Log in, because it's an Ubuntu instance, you log in as Ubuntu. And log in there, and it comes up successfully. So you are using a pre-created C5 metal. Would I be best to launch a whole new instance? So core count, Mark. What do you mean by you are using a pre-created C5 metal? Do you mean you've got an AMI that you are using? Let us know what's going on with that. It could be that if you're using another AMI that doesn't like the C5 metal series, maybe it's an older AMI created from maybe Amazon Linux 1 before Amazon Linux 2, it might not like that metal instance. But the metal instance is working fine, costing me $4 an hour, and seems to be chugging along quite nicely there. Remind me to turn them off afterwards. So yes, that's my guess. Since you are getting the status check errors, it would be related to your AMI. Okay, let's pick another question off here. Aliases. Mark says, yes, I have an AMI. It shows up in my instances. I right-click to launch it. So it could be that the issue is something to do with that particular AMI. So as long as you do what I showed before, and I launched, at least what I did, I launched this Ubuntu shown in the quick start, and that one worked perfectly good for me. Make sure you choose x86, not ARM. ARM is for the A instances that are running on the Graviton processor that Amazon has made. Maybe you can answer my question. Are there any EC2 servers, says Unicode, with new Turing architecture NVIDIA GPUs for NVENC encoding? What is NVENC? There are some great new instance types with the Gravitons. I listened to a reInvent session all about them. And the P3 instances are really nice. These ones have Tesla GPUs, tensor cores, lots of things like that. So that one might answer NVENC for video encoding. So they may NVLink. The answer is, hey, these ones have NVIDIA GPUs, so that might be the ones that are good enough for you. If you want to do video encoding, of course, we've got a couple of other services. We've got the Elastic Transcoder service. I just used this the other day, actually. This one's getting a little bit old. I'll tell you about the newer one in a moment. So the Elastic Transcoder service is great. I had a file, actually recorded my show last week. The CQ show last week, and my machine recorded in MKV format, and I couldn't upload it to YouTube. I had to convert it to MP4, and I used Elastic Transcoder here. So you can actually see my job here. And maybe I can go into my job and show it. So what I did here is I gave it an input of an MKV file, and I said, please save it as an MP4 file. It then went off. The video was 30 minutes long. You're charged for Elastic Transcoder based on the length of the video. It doesn't matter how long it takes to encode, it's the length of the video. So many cents per minute or something like that. And the actual transcoding took 7 minutes. So a 30-minute video transcoded in 7 minutes after waiting a minute in the queue. And then I just pulled the video off S3. So that's one way of doing it. There is also this service, Elemental. Elemental is a company that AWS bought out a while ago, and now all of the AWS Elemental services are available for you in the console, and Media Convert is the equivalent solution that will convert various jobs for you. So you could go in here and say, hey, I want to, it's got so many options, I just don't understand what all these things are doing. And modifying audios and captioning and cropping and clipping. This is professional grade media stuff. There's also Media Live, where you can do lifetime streaming and overlays and mixing videos and amazing stuff. So maybe you can use those services, but otherwise, if you want to try it yourself, look for any of these instances, such as the P3 family, which has NVIDIA GPUs. What other things have NVIDIA out here? P3s. The Inferencia ones. These ones are great for machine learning inference, which have special chipsets for that. And the older GPU ones have the older type of NVIDIA chipset in there as well. Unfortunately, Tesla V100 and Volta architecture are not Turing. I'm terribly sorry. Does Twitch use that behind the scenes? I have no idea what Twitch uses behind the scenes. Think about how massive Twitch is, the number of hours that people are streaming, and it's pretty live. You know, you send stuff. I know I'm in Sydney. I think I send to a Twitch endpoint in Sydney. It then has to distribute that around the world to other locations where you are tuning in from and stream that. The amount of bandwidth and all that would be crazy. And yes, they'd be doing some re-encoding to have the tightest formats out there as well. So amazing stuff must be going on in there. Okay, here's a question, and Marcin has answered this. Are you on the stream, Marcin? Marcin lives in Perth, here in Sydney, in Australia, doing a fantastic job answering things. Which reminds me, later in the show, I will show you some stats I've been pulling out of Stack Overflow. I'll tease you at the moment. How long do you think it takes for a question on Stack Overflow to be answered? Now, first of all, not every question is answered. Maybe 50 to a half to two-thirds of questions get an answer on Stack Overflow. But of those that get an answer and the answer is accepted, which means a person ticks a little thing on the side to say, yes, that satisfied my need. Have a think for a moment and let me know how many days you think it is until an answer is submitted, which eventually becomes the accepted answer. How long do you think it is? I'll wait a moment for you to throw your guesses into the stream. And let me know what you think it is. So what do you guess? Under 24 hours. Ooh, you think it's that fast? Anyone else? What do you think your the time is for somebody to submit an answer? Under 8 hours. We're getting lower. We're also getting warmer, I should say. I was quite surprised by this analysis. I thought, yeah, within a day, you get maybe within 2 days, you get things 4 days. So here's my analysis. This is of AWS tagged questions. Let's whack this up a bit. Come on. Go there. Thank you. Whack it up. My analysis showed that 47%, so of the accepted answers, 47% of them were there within 2 hours. I didn't break that down any further because I thought, well, yeah, that's amazing. some of them are within minutes. And in fact, I answered a question myself within about 4 minutes of being posted. I just did that yesterday. So we can see here that the big blue thing is within 2 hours. If we go around about here, it's hard for me to see myself. Within 12 hours, 3/4 of them, 73% are done. Within 2 days, 88% of the accepted answers are in. So if you want to score big on AWS, it looks like you've got to get in quick, man. But it also means that there's around the clock people helping other people answer questions on Stack Overflow, which is just fantastic. And I'll show you later on something called StackExchange Data, where you can extract these sorts of metrics from Stack Overflow. So stay tuned for that. Okay. When would you choose Route 53 alias over Cname? Do you say route or route? I'm Australian, so I should say route, but I say route. I've been trained. I'm trying to figure out if I should use Route 53 alias functionality or Cname for post domain pointing to an AWS load balancer. Based on the documentation, the advantage is you can use an alias on the zone apex. So if you have StackOverflow.com, that is your zone apex. And if you want to create a DNS record for StackOverflow.com, you can give it a record which points to an IP address that says please send all traffic here. You can't give it a CNAME. Oh, you can also, no, you can't give it a CNAME at the zone apex. Or can you? Zone apex? No, you can't give a CNAME at the zone apex, which means you can't point it to another load balancer. So this causes a whole lot of troubles when you're doing DNS. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if we go to Route 53, you can actually do this by using a capability called an alias. So if I go into my hosted zone I've got here, and I create a hosted zone, John as a domain.com. This does not exist. And within here, I create a record set, and I try to create a CNAME on this top level domain name. So if somebody goes to johnhasadomain.com and they type it in, and it has a CNAME, and I put in Stack Overflow. So CNAME simply means, hey, if someone types in this web address, please restart the DNS resolution by using this particular name. And if I go and say create, it says CNAME with DNS is not permitted at the zone apex. Mr. Bob says the two benefits of an alias are performance. Oh, no need to do recursive lookup. Costs and lookups on the alias records are free. Wow, that's lots of, we'll drill down there. So I cannot put the name, for example, of a load balancer in here because a load balancer has a CNAME, not an IP address, because the CNAME can result in many IP addresses. And so you can't do it. So what you can do is you come in here and say, I want to create an A record and tick alias equals yes. And that allows you to select many different things, such as an S3 website, a load balancer, a CloudFront distribution, VPC endpoints, etc. So I could then come in and select my load balancer from the list. So benefit number one, at the zone apex, the very top, it lets you select a load balancer, which you would normally have to do with a CNAME, which you can't do. Mr. Bob says it's faster, so it's interesting. I mentioned before that a CNAME restarts the DNS resolution process and says, please resolve this name and use that as the answer. In this case, the alias would simply return the answer because Route 53 knows what the answer is. Lookups on alias records are free. If you're using AWS services through an alias, we provide it nice and low cost. Let's look at the pricing for Route 53. Really, really low cost to do your... I know some companies that pay hundreds of dollars to other companies to host their DNS. They move to AWS and it's like $7 for the month. It's crazy. 50 cents per hosted zone. Queries, 40 cents for the first billion queries, a bit like McDonald's, billions of burgers sold. 40 cents for billions of queries. There's different types of resolution. Latency will route you based on the fastest connection. Geographic will route you based on where you are. Alias queries, here we are provided at no cost to Route 53 customers, to load balancers, CloudFront, etc. So that's a good tip to know. Reduce your costs by using aliases. I shall remove my John has a domain. I accidentally set up a health check one time pointing to a website just to demonstrate how health checks work. And every 5 seconds, Route 53 went and pinged that website to make sure it was still healthy. And eventually the owners of that website tracked me down and said, could you please stop doing that? You're creating lots and lots of traffic on our website. So I apologize for the people who did that. It was on my favorite demonstration website that I often go to, which is cheese.com. For some reason, I have a fascination with cheese, so I set up a health check to go to cheese.com, and I do apologize to you, cheese.com, for slowing down your web server there all the time. Oh, look at this. A lovely blue cheese. Blue cheeses are expensive. I've discovered in life cheese in general is expensive. I used to get my fascination by going to airport lounges and getting the blue cheese they had available there, so that's gone out. They say cheese is as addicting as heroin. Well, I don't inject cheese into my veins, but I guess this blue cheese has blue veins, so there's a lot of similarities there. This is going off topic. Martin has answered on this one. The advantage of Alias over Cname is aliases are free. Yep, that was mentioned there. So Martin's done a good answer on that one. Let's move on. Just wanted to show you that one because it's an interesting topic. This is a nice simple one, but I thought it worth mentioning. I spun up an Ubuntu machine with IPv4 and IPv6. We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to disable IPv4 and then only IPv6 should be used. Great. Not enough people using IPv6. I saw an article the other day where someone was saying, I'd like to move to only IPv6, but I can't lodge my taxes via IPv6. So until the government stops requiring IPv4 for taxes, I'm still going to have to keep using IPv4 and probably many other things as well. As pointed out here, you cannot disable the IPv4 part of the interface. So when you create a VPC, you must assign a subnet with an IPv4 range. You must give a private IPv4 address to your instance. You can additionally do IPv6. So I thought it's worth mentioning that you still always require IPv4. And somebody suggested you could take out the routes, so that the traffic won't flow through IPv4, but it will still have IPv4 on there. Thanks for suggesting. Now, Mokugo DevOps has recently been rocketing up the charts on AWS. I'd like to say congratulations to them. They've been answering lots of AWS questions, so great to see you on there. From Brighton in the UK. Chris, so thank you very much for participating on Stack Overflow, and you've jumped in on many questions and got there before me, probably because you're on the opposite of world with me, so you can answer questions when I'm asleep. I like to think that all of us as a community can provide answers around the clock on Stack Overflow. Let's hop into the Stack Overflow room, see if any of you have visited there yet and said any greetings. Marcin is there. Hello, Marcin. Are you watching the stream? Fantastic. He's probably working, but we'll see what that comes out later. Mappings, we've done that one, we've done that one, we've done that. I can turn it off. This one was answered, but I thought it was also, where is the chat room? I will post you the chat room. Feel free to participate. Marcin, can't watch it this time. Terribly sorry. You might watch the recording that was there. That's fantastic. Closest thing to a chat room you get. This chat capability, as you all log on here. Hello, Sense Deep and Mr. Bob and a user with a big number. This chat room is apparently based on an older technology called Basecamp, which was part of the Frog Creek. They had a whole lot of systems that they could use. And so they grabbed the chat code from that and sort of plonked it into Stack Overflow as well. Stack Overflow is one of their most successful ventures they moved into. Oh, somebody's answered this since I last marked it. It's Mokugo. Mokugo. Running a script on an EC2 instance from Lambda. So I've been looking for ways to create a Lambda function that can access directly the contents of an EC2 Linux instance. So, okay, so Lambda accessing EC2. My goal is to be able to call a script residing in the home directory and pass in a variable which the script will use for processing. I've been looking at different ways to do it. So before I look at the suggested answer there, it's very hard to run things on an EC2 instance. You normally lock down your EC2 instances at any computer on the internet, really, so that you can't reach out to it and do things. Now, web servers obviously need to be public. They open up port 8443 to allow incoming things, but typically you don't have access to an EC2 instance. So looks like Mokugor has given a good answer here. There's the systems manager. The AWS systems manager has a capability called the run command. And the run command can send, he said send command here, but it actually, what's the difference between a send command and a run command? It can actually go and run a command on a managed instance. So the way it works is you have an agent installed on the instance, the systems manager agent, which comes installed with Amazon Linux 2 and our Windows AMIs. And you can tell systems manager, please run this command on these instances, maybe anything with a particular tag. It goes off, runs it, collects the results, retries any failures, and gives you the results. So that is a nice way of doing it. And you don't have to expose your instance to the world. Because the agent is sitting on the instance, it calls back to headquarters, it calls back to AWS, and when you want to send it a command, we can send that down to it. It runs and comes back. So if we compare that to the run command, maybe that is officially is the run command. Go to SSM run. Okay, AWS SSM run command. The command is probably called send command. So it talks here all about the run command, installing the agent, things like that. Setting it up, running commands, throughs, using the CLI with the run command, and the answer is, where is it? So there it is. Yes, it is in fact called the send command. So the run command is called the send command. Thank you, marketing folks. Vajrabum. I have zero reputation on Stack Overflow, can only watch. I guess I should answer some questions. So how can you get reputation? Stack Overflow, get reputation. So the more reputation you have, the more you can do on Stack Overflow. How do I earn it and how do I lose it? So when your question is upvoted, when your answer is upvoted, you get more, which is great. When you've given a good answer, it's good. You can edit questions if you've got enough points. So it looks like in the beginning, the best way to get reputation is to answer a question. So look for a question, try and beat me, Mokuju, and Marcin, and try and answer a question. Once you get some reputation, you can then vote other things. So they're trying to avoid spam where people just create accounts to give each other points to get more capabilities. And the neat thing is, when you earn reputation, you get privileges on Stack Overflow. And the privileges start off down the bottom here as being able to create, ask a question or contribute an answer. So hold on, if you need 1 point to do that, how do you get the first point? I'm confused here. So hopefully something will give you 1 point. Maybe you can add a comment or something on there. What's good? Upvoting. Once you've got 15 reputation, you can upvote. You can flag posts to say if they're spam. You can add comments in places. I'm still confused how you get that first point. Stack Overflow. It's been so long since I did it. I think you start with 1 rep. Oh, thank goodness. So that means you can create posts that are out there. But Varabum is saying they've only got 0 rep. So that'll be interesting. All the way up here, become trusted user. You can access site analytics. I haven't played with that one much. You can approve things, you can edit things. So it's a way of saying, hey, I've done stuff and people think I have lots of good stuff that I'm contributing. Pranav, I'm new to this chat. Looking forward to AWS Lambda. What's this? Swift Lambda Runtime. Swift AWS Lambda. I didn't hear about that. Introducing May 29. Oh, it was a couple of weeks ago. A new open source project for Swift Lambda Runtime. So Lambda has a number of languages out of the box, but you can also provide your own libraries to do additional services. So that's really interesting. Swift is very popular on the Apple side of things. You can write iPad apps and all that using it. So, what do you know? Put that in the chat in case any of you are interested in following up on that. Thank you. Most interesting. Okay, let's have a look at something else here. Okay, Lambda always seems to come in for some interesting questions here. My goal is to trigger a Lambda from another Lambda, and I'm getting stuck because the second Lambda never gets started. So looks like some Java code. What are they tagged here? C#, same thing. Ooh. So they're calling, creating a Lambda client, and they're invoking Lambda, and they're doing it as an async. I don't quite understand the C# async stuff. And down here, they're saying, I saw this before, in the debugging, they've got this trigger Lambda comment. So they're getting this comment in the log file, but they're not getting trigger done. Instead, the Lambda function ends. So it looks like it's something to do. Any good C# people who understand async? Feel free to answer this question. I'll put it in the chat as well. Oops, not there. So if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say that it is not waiting for the Lambda, the second Lambda function to return, and it is possible the Lambda function is ending too early and not successfully completing the async call. So I'm not good enough in async. Oh, what are people saying here? Here's my example code. You should really do it this way. That's nice. So not too sure what's going on there, but I wanted to highlight it because sometimes, especially Node, if you've ever done Node.js programming, it's got this whole strange callback model. And a lot of people accidentally use the wrong call function, which means that it doesn't wait for the function to end and the Lambda function then quits. How do I delete AWS config using PowerShell? The guy basically wants cheap step functions. True, you could use step functions for one Lambda to call another. Sometimes people want to call another Lambda as a microservice, get back the result, and then continue processing. So that's sort of a good way of doing it. How do I delete AWS config using PowerShell? So what I wanted to do here is not so much answer the question, but I wanted to explain that some of you who might be out there as Windows users and you enjoy programming in PowerShell, you can call the AWS CLI from PowerShell. But if you want to do something that's PowerShell native, just search for AWS PowerShell, and you will find this handy page. Put that in chat. And what this is it's a whole lot of tools that let you do PowerShell native stuff to call AWS services. So if I was to say I want AWS PowerShell for AWS config, search I did earlier, comes up with all of these amazing commands. So looks like the standard PowerShell type command names there. So the person was asking, how do I delete config using PowerShell? And there's something called a configuration recorder. So the recorder is what creates things. So you'd probably remove the configuration recorder to have it stop making new stuff, and then some other command that would delete the repository. It just saves it in S3. But anyway, I just want to highlight that there's these PowerShell tools for AWS that can be really great instead of having to use the AWS CLI. Marcin, hi. So many chats. And that was there. Oh, Amazon Lex. This one I just wanted to demonstrate a bit of editing in things. So as a good Stack Overflow citizen, you're not there to just answer questions. You're there to help improve Stack Overflow for everyone. And Stack Overflow is actually a wiki, which means you can go in there, you can make changes. At times you can even change other people's answers. I do this sparingly, but if someone has put in something that's hard to, some bad formatting or a link, maybe they just pasted a URL, and I like expanding URLs into the text link that explains what the URL is pointing to. I often go in there and edit, but I very much go in and edit questions. So I want to give you an example of doing this. This is a new user, Prashant, who joined a week ago and has posted 2 questions. a new line character in Lex, which is what we're looking at, and get a welcome message in Lex. So I think they're playing around with Lex at the moment. So here you can see this question is a little bit hard formatted, so it looks a little strange. So since I have enough permissions, I can go in and write it. And the first thing you'll notice is it's got carriage returns in there, but because he didn't leave they didn't leave a blank line between each of the lines, it all gets smushed together. So let's do a bit of cleanup. Amazon Lex, let's give it a nice capital letter there. Lex, by the way, was named after Alexa, because Lex is the technology that's inside Alexa. So it's sort of got a cute name. Isn't that nice? I'm stuck how to get a new line character. One other thing I like doing is expanding abbreviations, because people for whom English is not their first language might not understand what people are saying. Let's make this pretty formatted. Fencing it turns it into code lines. I'm currently getting this. I've already tried the following, but it's not working. Okay, and that looks a bit nicer and is easier to understand what's going on out there. So I just say I improve the formatting a bit and save that one. I don't know Lex enough to answer this question. If you do, you are most welcome to, but I just wanted to demonstrate how you can edit questions to get things working out there. Okay, coming up a bit later, we'll have a look at some Stack Overflow data. For those of you who've just joined us recently, my name is John Rotenstein. I'm a technical evangelist at AWS, and I like answering AWS questions on Stack Overflow. So I thought, why not build a bit of a community, have some people joining me as we do this. I invite you all to join our Stack Overflow room. This one here, I'll put it in our chat again. Join our room. Would love to see you out there, and I see a lot of names answering questions, so happy to reach out and say hello to a lot of you. I like this question. Oh, he edited it. Oh, very good. I'll just show you this question. I just wanted to highlight because it was a very nothing question. I'm interested in how did you approach this case? Did you follow IBM guidelines, or you sorted out something different? And that was the whole question. So it was good to see that somebody's, we closed that question. So collectively, a whole lot of people on AWS, myself included, Mokugo, somebody else, we voted to close the question, but they're welcome to come back and provide more information. And if they provide more information, we can reopen the question. Again, 3 of us have to vote to reopen the question. So let's see. I'm involved in building MQ on AWS. See, this isn't really a programming question. I'm just going to leave it there because I still think it should be closed. So officially, it's not really showing some code and trying to do things. It's asking for advice. Sometimes what I say is, you might get a better answer on Reddit. Now, the great thing about Reddit is lots of people have opinions, and therefore it's a great place to go. Here is the AWS subreddit out there, and it's amazing. Golf? Why are people chatting about golf? When CTOs say they want to use the cloud over a golf match, and they go, oh yes, let's go and do it. So a whole lot of amazing different topics here. And the great thing is, whichever topic you pick here tends to have amazing opinions coming across it. So let's go for that golf question that came here. 59 upvotes. You can see there's a heap of discussion here. So Stack Overflow is the place to get answers. Reddit is the place to get opinions. And I'm not saying opinions are bad. Sometimes you need an opinion. How's my architecture? What's good? What's bad? That's when you want some opinions. So that could be the better thing to do there. Publishing SQS message from the public internet. Where did I mark this one? My agents running on various environments and devices are going to drop periodic messages from public network. These messages will be processed by my Lambda. they're asynchronous. I'm thinking of SQS to feed the Lambda. Just that SQS endpoint will be open to the internet. How can I validate the messages posted to SQS? Most of the devices pushing messages will be on a customer VPN, so establishing a VPN link is possible. So I think what the architecture here they're trying to do is lots of things out there on the internet, sending lots of data, and he wants to process it with Lambda, maybe store in a database, do some analysis, etc. And you don't want people out there on the internet calling your Lambda function directly. You don't want to give them credentials to do that. So the option that they're doing here is pushing the message into SQS. SQS can then trigger a Lambda function and process the message. If there's too many messages that come in and the Lambda function gets throttled, SQS will retry and keep sending to those Lambda functions. The downside of this approach is that sending to SQS, I think you need some credentials, or can you publicly send to SQS? Mr. Bob, do you know? Can I send anonymous to SQS? I know you can open an SQS queue to be open to everyone, but I don't know if you can anonymously send a message. Here we are. This is something on Stack Overflow. What do you know? How to write a write-only SQS queue without an access key or secret key. And that means allow anyone to send a message to this particular queue. That seems interesting. I'd not recommend allowing unauthenticated access to a queue, but you can do it as follows. So it looks like, yes, you can have unauthenticated messages being sent to the queue. But there's an alternative, and I may have... okay, so here's Marson saying you shouldn't make your queue public. Really good advice. Frozen Truth, you need required IAM permissions. SQS is one of these special services that has its own policies in addition to IAM. So IAM can say you are allowed to push a message into this queue, you're allowed to retrieve a message from this queue, etc. And he says, just realizing my power was not plugged in. When I create a queue here, stack, create a queue, there's this section here called permissions where I can edit a policy document which says who is allowed to access this queue. So I can go in and add a permission, and I can say everybody is allowed to send a message to this queue. And if I look at that policy here, it's now created this one saying anyone can send a message to this queue. Slightly dangerous because anyone can send a message to this queue. And people can spam it, can send things that can cause you more expense. It could confuse your program, crash it, etc. I like to say that if people send lots of traffic to your website in the cloud, they might not crash it. It might not be a denial of service because you can scale to handle it, but it's a denial of finance attack because every time they send things to you, it's probably costing you money. So I will get rid of that policy before people do exactly that. But SQS, like S3, has the ability to add policies directly onto the resource. S3, you've got a bucket policy. Here you've got an SQS policy. SNS might have something similar in there as well. Let's delete that queue. So it's saying don't make the queue public. And I've added another one here. I saw this, must have been yesterday for me, saying that this use case might actually be served better for IoT, Internet of Things, which is another AWS service. Sorry, Frozen Truth, isn't that using IAM underneath? Yeah, the SQS policy is using the same policy syntax as IAM, but it allows access on the queue rather than putting the policy on an IAM user or an IAM group or an IAM role. So IoT is an interesting service here designed for sensors and lots of small devices to send lots of data throughout the day. Some of these devices send it every few seconds. And the general overview here is devices send it in. There's a message broker which handles MQTT, which is a lightweight communication protocol, much lighter than HTTPS. And the benefit of that is you can have really low powered devices that don't have a lot of memory, don't have a lot of compute grunt, and they can send MQTT messages pretty quickly. And so they can send messages to the broker. There's a thing called a shadow device where it keeps a record of what the last thing was. So let's say you have a temperature sensor that's saying it's Australia 21 degrees, in America it might be 70 degrees. It sends that and you can say, hey, tell me what the last reading was. That comes out of the device shadow. You can attach a rule engine that says, oh, when a rule comes in, if the temperature is greater than boiling, then please trigger a Lambda function to do the following. So it's got a bit of logic built into there, which can trigger Lambda or store things in S3 or send a message to SQS, etc. So IoT could be a good way of going. And they weren't quite aware of that one. So many services, so little time. Fantastic. Let's refresh this page. Okay. We've done that one. It's blocking. I don't know what about that. New line character we've done. Redshift. I just want to talk. Oh, they deleted the question. So if I asked them to provide better input data and output, and they deleted the question. This was an interesting one where they wanted to say, hey, I've got a start date and end date. This is what's known as the hotel problem. Somebody checks in on the 5th of the month. Somebody checks out on the 10th of the month. How do you generate a list of the days in between the 10th, the 5th, and the 10th? And SQL isn't too good for that because it's got a start date and end date. You've got to generate rows for each of the interceding days. And they actually wanted it slightly more complex, where they wanted those rows to be only the Saturdays that are within those two dates. There is a function in Redshift, similar to most SQLs, where you can say, give me the day of the week. So you could just say, if the day of the week is Saturday, do it. But it needs a bit more complexity in answering multiple rows from one row in an SQL service. But they deleted it, which means they probably satisfied it. So that's fine with us. We don't have to answer it. There is actually a badge you can get for deleting your own question, which is downvoted. So if people think it's a bad question, you delete it, you get rewarded for deleting that question, which is fantastic. This was an interesting discussion going on this one. Somebody was saying, I want to call a delete object command on S3. And they weren't sure of how to know if the object was deleted. Does it come back and say, yes, the object was deleted? And apparently you don't get a confirmation with a delete command, especially with an async call. And I found the answer quite interesting. So I thought it worth pointing out that AWS S3 has eventual consistency. So there's a whole article here, eventual consistency. What's that? 3 things you can have: availability, partition tolerance, and something. And it's all quite complex. If you're interested, I will refer you to this article from Werner Vogels, which is a continuation of a previous article I wrote. And it's all about the eventual consistency model. CAP theorem, that's right. Thank you very much. All of you jumped in there. CAP theorem. All of you are shivering in your boots remembering back to doing this, eh? Brewer's theorem states consistency means every read receives the most recent write or an error. So if somebody writes anything and you read it back, you should get the latest number. Availability, every request receives a response without the guarantee it contains the most recent write. So that's fighting a bit with the first one. And partition tolerance, it'll continue to operate despite messages being dropped or by network nodes being delayed or networking things. And the basic theorem is choose 2 out of 3. You can't have guaranteed latest results, high availability, and being able to continue operating while your system has problems. And so S3 is behind the scenes eventually consistent. It's running across many, many servers. So when you make an update to an object and you read it straight back in, you might get an older version of the object, not the latest version. So it's not fully consistent. So what they're saying here is even deletes are eventually consistent. When you send the delete command, it might delete it off one node, and that will eventually flow through the other nodes. It can just be a second or so, but sometimes it takes a bit longer. And so that's a really interesting take, that don't think of S3 as just a disk. It's a very complex, highly scaled system. Dynamodb. Dynamodb has an interesting thing with consistency, which is probably best explained on the pricing page. Mr. Bob, S3 is read after create consistent. Correct. If you create an object and go to read it, it will be there. So they force copy new objects, but if you delete an object or update an object, it is eventually consistent. If we look at provision capacity for DynamoDB and you look at the pricing, there's a concept with DynamoDB, which is our NoSQL sort of document database system. It has read capacity units and write capacity units. So a read capacity unit gives you a 4K read, one strongly consistent read request per second for every read capacity unit you purchase. You want to read 100 things per second, buy 100 units. Or you can get 2 eventually consistent reads per second. So what we're saying is, if you don't mind getting slightly out of date data, we'll give it to you half price, 50% off. Fantastic. You know, think about it. If you are in Facebook and your friend count is going up and your friend count is only showing 702 instead of 703, it's not the end of the world for you. You know, in a few seconds or a minute later, it'll have the latest count. But think of the number of requests that a big system would be going to the database. If they can use eventually consistent, it's quicker to retrieve. We're willing to give you a discount of the price, and it works out pretty much the same for all of your users. Mr. Bob, I think US East 1 was not for a long time. US East 1, our original region, has many strange things with it. And yes, thank you for the quote. In 2015, S3 now supports read after write consistency for new objects in the US standard region, which was the name for US East 1. So all regions are now the same. Another difference with US East 1, I don't know if it's still there, bucket names could have uppercase letters. We have a rule that bucket names have to be DNS name compatible. So DNS names are not case sensitive. They can't have things like underscores in a domain name. So bucket names can't have underscores or uppercase either. But US East 1 was breaking those rules because it was created before we added the S3 functionality out there. Oh, reset your AWS account. I like this one. This was asked yesterday. I want to delete everything I've done in my account except for credits and root user stuff. This includes IAM users, EC2 stuff, S3 stuff, Route 53, etc. How can I do this without having to scour the AWS account to find everything? So I often recommend that people have a sandbox account. So if you're building your systems, you want to experiment, hey, can I connect a load balancer to a Lambda function, that sort of thing? Have a sandbox account where whatever you do will not impact your production systems, and theoretically anything that you've done in there can be wiped either overnight or on the weekend or something like that. Maybe even give it to each of your developers. The downside is it costs money, so maybe let them know how much the sandbox is costing and encourage them to delete things. There is no built-in thing on AWS to say delete everything. In fact, even here they're saying things like, oh, I want to keep some of my root user configuration. What are you going to delete? Fortunately, the folks out there in GitHub land have created a number of tools. My favorite is AWS Nuke. So AWS Nuke will go out and delete lots and lots of services. You have to specifically say, please delete. It will default to not deleting things. It will go off and find things for you. So wow, this is detailed. So EC2 key pairs, EC2 instances, but even DHCP options. These are minor options you can set in your VPC, disk volumes, VPCs, IAM users, etc. So it'll list them and tell you whether or not it will. Cannot delete. That's interesting. Some things it can't delete, and it'll just leave them there. So AWS Nuke is a great utility. Let's put that in the chat. Do not use it on your production account. Be very careful. And Jarmod here also suggests another one called Cloud Nuke that looks like it's trying to be a bit more options. It's not just AWS. Looks like they're trying to do other things as well. And yet all of this stuff looks like it's AWS context. So that's another one you might want to have a look at. Grunt work, I like that. But quite a common ask, how do you factory reset? Okay, let's move on to something different. I'd like to show you something called StackOverflow, StackExchange Data. And I'll put a link in the chat. This thing is something that lets you look at information about Stack Overflow or many of the other StackExchange sites. My favorite of which is this one, the site for Apple questions is called Ask Different, because it's think different, ask different. I can go in here and say I would like to do some queries against some Stack Overflow data. There are hundreds and thousands of pre-written queries here. How many upvotes do I have for each tag? Find interesting unanswered questions. What are the top 500 answers for this site? And you can basically go in here and choose, make your own query. I might just pick one here. Most popular Stack Overflow tags in May 2010. So somebody has written, this is MySQL against their database. And I can come in here and say, run this query. I'm not logged in, so I've got to use a robot. Run my query. And so what this is doing, I'll explain how they're written in a moment. Oh my gosh. So tags, questions, answers, join with things. Wow, this is a really complex query. That's going to be running a bit. I have created a few of my own. And if you follow this link just here, this bit.ly link, you'll come to this gist on GitHub. And I have a number of standard reports that I've written here. So let's have a bit of a play and see these reports that I've written. So I might just log in so that it recognizes who I am. Thank you. And so this query is going off, and what it's doing is it's looking at all of the questions that are out there on Stack Overflow. And it's saying questions and answers are stored in the same table. So it's saying find a question where it isn't closed, where a tag is like Amazon or AWS since 2019, and group and various things. So what's this coming up with here? This is saying each month, this is the number of questions that are tagged either Amazon or AWS. How many of them receive an answer? How many of the answers are accepted? And how many views do they get? Now you'll notice older questions have more views because they've been around longer, so they get more hits. The other thing you'll notice is answers over time get less and less. So for questions in June, which we are in, only 50% have been answered, but over time the answers go up. There's two reasons for this. One, there's more time, more people come and do answers. The other thing I think is that questions are going up over time. So you look here, we had 2,000, 2,500, 3,000. We've now got 4,000 questions. So this is where we need you. We need you to help answer AWS questions. Don't be afraid. Come in and help answering them, because we now have almost twice as many questions as from 2 years ago. So that's why the answer rate's going down, because there's just more questions. There's more services. Accepted answers. Now, not everyone clicks accepted on there. I always wish they do, because people get an additional 15 reputation points for doing it. But it's a fact of life that not everyone accepts the questions. So even though 80% of questions were answered, only 37% are accepted, and that's lower when the questions have been there for less time. So that's an interesting one, seeing how many questions are out there. Questions by year. What's it been like on Stack Overflow with AWS questions? You should be able to run these reports yourself as well. So this is just going out and grouping by, it's grouping by month as well. So that looks, this is by year. Oh, it's not month, it's year. Let me fix that. This is year. Just like Stack Overflow, you can go in and you can edit things. I don't think you can edit my queries, but you can fork the queries and run them yourself to get additional things coming up there. And let's have a look at the yearly stats. Okay, so questions, 32,000 questions in 2019. So huge amounts of questions going up there if you group them by year. Where'd you find the database schema, says Paul Noob. So if you have enough reputation to log in and go in here, you can just say compose query, and it has the whole listing up here so you can see the different types. I find the easier thing to do is to rip off other people's queries, find a query that is similar to what you want and then modify it. There is also a documentation page out there if you search for StackExchange Data. Let's see, StackExchange Data documentation. It's a bit hard to find, but database schema documentation for public data dump. This sort of gives it to you fairly well, so I'll put that in the chat as well. So you'll eventually find the documentation, but feel free to take my queries and give them a go. Answers for a given user, so you can put your own user there. The top answerers for the past 6 months. So I'm very interested in finding who the top people are. So for the last 6 months, I have contributed 733. Marson, great work, Marson. 490. Mokugo, we saw him in there. 309. Him, her. Jarmod, I know, happens to work for AWS. So I've been interfacing. Gordon Linoff. Gordon Linoff is an amazing fellow. He answers SQL questions in about 3.5 seconds flat. All of my queries I have to actually exclude Gordon because lots of people have SQL questions they also tag as Amazon, and he answers them. He's the top AWS answerer because he answers all the SQL type questions in there. So sometimes I've got to take him out of the queries because it just goes crazy, but Gordon's amazing. Jelly, Chenji, who was on our broadcast a couple of weeks ago, started answering because of this stream and thought it was such a great thing. Hopped on. You're out there, Jelly. Haven't seen you today. AWS PS is in the Palestinian territories, doing lots of AWS work. So it's great to see them out there. So I would love to see your IDs out here on Stack Overflow. EJ Brennan, he's in the UK, I think. No, in the US. So start answering questions. Hop into our chat room. Anyone else talking in the chat room? Nobody else chatting in here. And come and start answering questions. And if you get high enough, I'd love to reach out to you and help support you in your AWS quest. Top answers in a month. Number of answers by month. This was the query I did to figure out how long it takes to answer a question. And I'll just give it a run. And I basically said, hey, get the question, get the answer, subtract the date, the timestamp of the question and the answer, and tell me if it's between, and it's in days. And I had to keep going smaller and smaller in days. So H2 is 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, and then I split it up into days. So these are the ones you can see how quickly questions are answered. And these ones are since the beginning of 2020. So that's how they come out there. And it's just amazing. When I was writing this query, I just couldn't believe how quick some of the answers were. Strangely, some questions had answers at exactly the same time, down to the timestamp. So I had to put something in here that said the creation date is different between the question and answer. I don't know why it is. I don't see how you can post a question and answer at exactly the same time. It might be if something was moved from a comment to an answer. I have no idea what was going on in there. So let's see how many questions are answered within what do we got? We've got 24 hours by 60 minutes in a day, 1440 minutes. Let's say 5 minutes. 7 to... Let's see how many answered within 5 minutes here. I will just replicate the first line and say it's between 0 and what did I say? 24 times 24 hours by 60 minutes. Or 5, so 7,200 over, I don't know what I'm saying here, 72, in a day, 1440 is in a day, 5 out of 1440 is 0.00, take that number, if it's between 0 and that number, and we'll say this is 5 minutes. Let's give it a run. Overflow bug with the query. And the answer is, how many questions are answered within 5 minutes? You can hear the gears churning. Here is, okay, 114 out of the month. So 114 questions answered, and that answer was accepted since the beginning of the year. So pretty amazing. And here is where I have actually excluded Gordon Linhoff. If I remove that bit of code and give it another run, remember this, 1747 answers within 2 hours. If I now include Gordon Linhoff, 1787. So he had like 40 questions included in there, and this number's gone up as well. So I just want to exclude him because he's a bit of an outlier within the whole system. Okay, so that is StackExchange Data reporting. You can have access to it. Feel free to have a play with those queries that I've set up and give them yourself. And I hope to see your names appearing on that list as well. Also on this list, which is accessible by this bit.ly link, some things I've got the link to the chat room, so you can always find us. Search for newest AWS questions without an accepted answer. So that's the normal search that I use when I want to go and look for questions. It says look for AWS questions without an answer. So jump in there and try and answer them. A great video by Jeff Atwood, one of the creators of Stack Overflow, talking about how to write a good question. Also great knowledge about how to write answers. A link to my Stopinators that I did a few episodes ago with some live coding. Some handy plugins I use. To give you an example, if I am answering a question, and let's go to pretend I'm answering a question, and let's say I was in here and I wanted to say, look at a particular page, and maybe I want to go to some AWS documentation. Nope, not that one. I want to go to AWS S3 bucket policies. So here is some CloudFormation documentation about how to use S3, and I want to link to that page. I have a little plugin, Chrome plugin here, where I can say, copy the current link to the page. When I go into my question, I just paste it in, and it's pasting it in markdown format. So it's giving me the nice name of the page and the link, and it looks very nice within the code. So that's how I always put my links in questions there. So if you are interested in that, you can grab it as well with this copy as markdown thing. The console recorder, I'll just spend a minute talking about this. This is the world's most amazing plugin. Your life is about to be changed forever if you've never seen this. And been disabled in Chrome. I will enable it. I've got it installed in my Chrome already. And the way it works is that you? No. Here's my, here it is. So I can go into the, let's say the EC2 console. Have you ever wondered how to write commands for the equivalent to what you do in the console? Or have you ever wondered how to write IAM policies to give you enough permission to do what you want to do? This is the tool of your dreams. You can come in and say, I want to start recording. So it's now observing what I'm doing in the browser. So I might go to security groups, and I might look for that ops security group we used earlier. And I will come into here and I will edit that. And I will take out my various entries from this security group and save the rules. Fantastic. So I've edited a security group. I will also go into my EC2 instances, and I have a Windows instance here, and I will change the instance type. We'll make it a T2 medium. Fantastic. And I will go and let's say start the instance. So the console recorder has been watching what I have been doing while I've been doing this. So I can come in here and say, stop recording. And what's it got for me here? It has written a Boto3 program to do what I wanted. It listed availability zones, templates, VPCs, A lot of these things ran in the background because the console does it. But one of the first things I did is I went into the security group and whoa, there's lots of chatter coming from the console in here. I would have removed Ingress. Revoke. Okay, I can't quite see it in there. There's stuff about the security groups. Describe. Somewhere in there I should have deleted it. Anyway, okay, that's the starting of the instance that I did in there. And before I did that, I changed the instance type. I can't see it in there. So anyway, it gives you a program to repeat everything that was done in the console. Here is a CloudFormation template. I didn't create any new resources. I just started. But if you launched an EC2 instance, it would write the CloudFormation template to give you the equivalent for that. Also in Terraform, Troposphere, the CDK, which is our programmable CloudFormation template. Here is the AWS CLI commands to do the equivalent things to everything that I did there in the console. Updating, removing things. Where's the start instance? There's the command to start that instance that I started. IAM. Here are the permissions required to do everything that I did there. I ran start instance on that particular instance. I also describe various resources, which is really, really great. And do it in JavaScript as well. So amazing stuff in this console recorder for AWS. And you can find it in your plugin store. I think it's for Chrome. I think I've also seen it for Firefox these days. So really, really nice console recorder. I have it linked there in my notes. So some really handy things. Anyway, we are approaching a couple of hours. So probably time for a lot of you to go to bed. For me, it's time to have some lunch. I want to thank you for joining me on AWS on Stack Overflow. Sorry for those problems we had in the beginning of the show. Great to have you there. Mr. Bob, did you shut down the M5? I love having you folks here. That's really nice of you. I do have a script that will automatically turn off instances for me overnight that I have not marked. Those of you who watch my Stopinator episode would understand how to do that. If you go to my simple Lambda Stopinators, it has logic to turn off things that it doesn't quite recognize, but good idea. I've racked up about $12 in charges on these ones. Goodbye to them. Thanks, Palm Noobs. Thank you for everybody for joining me here. Same time next week. We have the AWS certification quiz show 3 hours ago. And then 2 hours ago is the AWS on Stack Overflow. And ask questions, ping me in the chat room. Would love to see you on there. Thanks for joining me. See you later. Bye-bye.